Hello and welcome to Super Nicktendo Unscripted, the podcast by Super Nicktendo on the Super Nicktendo Freemium channel. FYI, if you're catching this for the first time, this is the second channel, so if you like what you see, make sure that you're subscribed. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of February, but I think we're going to have to extend it to the end of March, so if you like the podcast, this is a podcast where I just talk about random topics that I have on my mind that I've collected over the week or so. I post every week, and it's just me talking for about 45 minutes to an hour, just whatever the heck I feel like. So if you have a topic that you want me to talk about, be sure to leave it in the comments below, or if you have any questions or comments and stuff, just make sure to leave them there. So, without further ado, let's get into the podcast. So, first off, we're talking about game pickups of the week. So, I actually picked up a decent amount this time, and not just like one or two games. I picked up 3 things, so I'm being a high roller. So, we're also going to, before we get into that, let's kind of overview the topics here. We're going to talk about the game pickups of the week, my last episode's performance on the main channel, how this last week's episode was saved by AI, would I sell my entire collection, and PlayStation VR 2 first impressions. So let's get it out of the way here. The game pickups of the week. So I got some interesting ones. So every Wednesday, I spend an hour outside of the house. Like it's just me time where I can spend like an hour or more outside of the house. And I go to half price books usually. I don't really go to any of the Goodwills or anything, but I go to half price books to just kind of see. And most of the time I just like pick up laser discs, and I get a lot of movies that way. But this time around, I looked into the case, and there's a couple of interesting takes here. The first one was Mortal Kombat 4 for the Game Boy Color. I didn't think that they made any more Mortal Kombats after 1 and 2 for the Game Boy, but apparently they made Mortal Kombat 4, and it is... I got it based off a whim because I was like, well, this seems really just so ridiculous. I wonder how bad it could be. And it's bad. Of course, like with a fighting game, when you only have 2 buttons, you definitely have to be very creative with it. And yeah, the graphics are bad. And I mean, it at least has like some voice where it's like round 1 fight, but that's about it. And yep, it's a terrible game, but I had to have it for my collection because I was just like, man, this is so bad it's good type thing, but it's just bad. But one game that is good that I got that I had surprisingly not added to my collection for a while. I'm surprised because I played this as a kid. I really enjoyed the game as a kid, and it just never made its way back into my collection. And that's the Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse for the Super Nintendo. That's like the golden age of Capcom games that weren't just Street Fighter or Mega Man. And this game is really good. It's a simple game, but it's also it's still it looks beautiful, and the gameplay is your classic platformer. It's not, I wouldn't consider it like the best platformer, because a lot of those Super Nintendo platformers, like they tried to do way too much, and like the frame rate and the sprites make the game feel really slow. But this one is a little bit once you get past the first level, it gets really into a dynamic gameplay where Mickey changes different hats and everything, and he becomes this different character with different powers and everything. It's very creative, and something that, like, if you've ever played like the Castle of Illusion or on the Sega Genesis, like that's kind of the same, engine and platform and stuff. So I'm excited to get back and like actually play that. And the other thing that I got is not necessarily a game, it's a platform, and that's the PlayStation VR 2. Like I said, with the one of the topics here in the podcast are my first impressions, so I'll get into that in a bit. But I will talk about that in a bit, so stay tuned. All right, on to the last episode's performance. So on the main channel, I managed to post a second video within a week. So that is something that I've been trying to do. Like, it's an experiment that I would post a video that I would know that would be evergreen first, and tie in the retronomics aspect of it and follow it up with a retronomics episode the next week. It's one of those things where retronomics specifically, like I've mentioned before, they have a very short lifespan on the channel, and it's always been pretty difficult to get YouTube to actually like recommend the retronomics episodes, because almost every single video that has like popped off or like gained an outside audience is only like it's always a video that doesn't really emphasize the retronomics aspect of it. So I came out with that so you want to buy a Nintendo GameCube video and get people to be like, hey, if you like the GameCube, next week I'm going to do a GameCube price video, so you should be subscribed for that. And it seems to have worked. I've gained like 20 or so subscribers after that retronomics video. The retronomics video hasn't quite cracked 1,000 views. It'll probably crack it by in the next couple of days. It's at 965 views, but the engagement on it has been satisfactory. I did drop the game footage. I used to have game footage on the videos, and like I've been having issues with my computer, and that's something that I'll also talk about in a bit. But my hard drive space I only have a 500 gig hard drive on my laptop, and that's one of the things. By the end of the year, I want to build a new computer with more storage space so that I don't run into these issues. But I do have a 1 terabyte SSD that's connected by USB-C, and one of the problems that I was running into is when I was rendering certain the pricing footage, like the hard drive would like disconnect in the middle of processing. So I don't know if it's because it got too hot or if it's just like a cheap hookup or anything like that. But I had to start rendering those pricing videos into the main hard drive, so I didn't have enough room for the game footage and the other stuff. And I tried to like clear as much stuff as it is, and I think I really have to go through and like make sure that everything is cleared out. I tried to clear the Adobe cache and everything, and that was only a gig. So I have to like reevaluate it. But I had been planning for a while to drop the video game footage for a while, because the video game footage just made the video like it wasn't as sharp as the rest of the video, because the footage that I got is like 480p and it fits in there just nice. But I want to replace that with some stats in that area instead of just having that blank space. But I still have yet to like figure out what kind of stats that I want to put in to that spot just yet. But if you guys have any ideas, like let me know. But I'm glad that like no one really like seemed to mention that there was game footage there, and so I was happy with that. And the next Retronomics episode, I'm gonna work on it. Hopefully not take a month again, but I want to either do the Dreamcast or the Wii U. And I'm not 100% sure if I still want to do like a buyer's guide versus like just like an episode of like an essay of like an evergreen thing. So I might just do like a just like a, for the Dreamcast, I might, instead of doing like a buyer's guide, I might do a like an essay of like, you know, the Dreamcast as like a fan does, like I don't know, like a fan's perspective of the Dreamcast, why the Dreamcast is so good, or, you know, my experience with the Dreamcast. I don't know yet. I haven't quite ironed it out, but I mean, the performance of the GameCube's buyer guide kind of indicates that, you know, people are interested in a buyer's guide. So, I mean, I could always do like 2 different videos. Like, I don't have to like abandon one or the other. So I'll do one more buyer's guide, I think, as kind of like a test to see if it's just like people interested in the GameCube or actual people, you know, just wanting to see anything about a system's buyer guide. But that's it for the performance. Now, let's get into this here. This is weird. So last week, I was really happy with myself because I filmed the podcast, and then I did the Retronomics video, and I did the voiceover for the Retronomic video game prices. Because usually I've been pretty lazy where I get enough muster to do the podcast or just do the video and then like nothing else. And was happy with myself because I was like, okay, I'm going to spend this block of time to just do my content, just do Super Nicktendo content, get it out of the way so that way I can release the video on time. So what happened is that I did the podcast. I was really happy with the performance because I was like, I had a good enough energy. Like I was warmed up. My voice was warmed up to do the episode for the Retronomics and everything like that. And the next day I go to like sync everything up for the podcast and it doesn't sync up. The audio doesn't sync up. And I was like, what? That's weird. Like every so often with Adobe Audition, that's what I use as recording software. Every so often it'll drop like a word or something like that. It's a second. It's not silence. It crunches it. So if I were to say park the car in the yard, it would only record park and then the yard. So it would be park the yard or something like that. Park in the yard or something. And that wasn't so bad because it's like you could just like drop the audio and like split it up just a little bit and sync it that way, and it would sync back. But this was not syncing, and I was like, what is going on? So I played it back, and it was like this really echoey thing here. And I saved it because I wanted to talk about it on this podcast. So here is what that audio sounded like. Super Nintendo's podcast. Okay, so you heard what it sounds like. It sounds demonic. It's almost like it's like layered on top of each other, like almost like I had the speakers going, and it was like a feedback or something like that. I don't know what the heck was going on. I actually thought that like my microphone was broken because, or like my audio interface or something. But I was listening through my monitors and I didn't sound any, like what I can hear through my monitor is what I can, like what is through this microphone. So I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So I was really frustrated because not only was the podcast like that, but the Retronomics episode and the voiceover was like that too. So it was like consistently across all 3 files. And that's what made me scared, is because, you know, I'm like, I have a decent setup. I'm like, I do not want to have to replace any of this. You know, maybe it was the cord or something like that. Maybe it got like squished or pinched or something like that. I don't know. But so I went back and I kind of debated. I was like, okay, well, at least like the camera has audio, like it has a microphone, but it sounds like this. Hello and welcome to the Super Nicktendo Unscripted Podcast. And so you can hear it's an echo because the camera sits pretty far away. It's about 3 or 4 feet away. And, a microphone, the way that it goes is like if you push it too far away and stuff, it kind of sounds like this. But like if you put it closer up, it sounds a little bit more rich. So I didn't want to push the podcast out with just that camera audio. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to scrap the episode because I didn't really want to record it again. I really didn't, because when you're doing unscripted content like that and you spend an hour and you feel really good about it and it doesn't hit, the motivation to do it again is just gone. So one thing that I had found on YouTube, it's something that I follow a lot on YouTube too. It's I follow, camera people and Adobe After Effects tutorials and different ideas to, make my content better. And one of the things that had come out was this thing. It's called Adobe Podcast. And it's basically an AI algorithm that Adobe has to massage your audio. And I had listened to it, one of the YouTubers, he gave a big thing. He had a microphone like this, the Shure SM7B, and he ran it through, and it sounded pretty much the same. But he went through a more extreme example. He's like, here I am in an empty apartment building with no sound treatment, no nothing, no whatever. And he ran it through and it sounded halfway decent. It didn't sound perfect. It didn't sound like it came through a $400 microphone. It still sounded mechanical. But I was like, let's just put it through and see what happens. Because what's the worst thing that happens? If it's unusable, then I scrap it. If it's usable, then, I'll run it. So I ran it through the podcast. And it sounds like this. Hello and welcome to the Super Nicktendo Unscripted Podcast. So I'm gonna play the original camera microphone. Hello and welcome to the Super Nicktendo Unscripted Podcast. And then the Adobe AI. Hello and welcome to the Super Nicktendo Unscripted Podcast. So you can kind of hear a little bit of difference, but it sounds halfway decent. If you are a casual person who doesn't know anything about what goes into sound treatment or anything like that, it sounds really good. But when you listen to them back to back, when I tell you that it sounds like AI, that I ran it through AI, you can start to listen to it, and it has this mechanical underwater type sound, but it worked. Will I ever use AI again for that? I don't want to be in a position where I have to do that. Because basically when it comes with sound is, I try to record as high quality as possible, because if I ever have to treat something, you have a lot of data to work with before it becomes distorted. And I do try my best to make sure that all of my recording and my video compositions and everything like that are set up in a way where I don't have to do a lot in post. So most of my videos, 99% of my videos, I never actually touch. I don't adjust the levels or anything like that. I don't put on a filter after the fact. What you're sounding right now, what you're hearing right now, is I think it's a compressor that's set up on the actual audio interface that goes in before the recording. So everything, the audio is already tuned, so that way I don't have to mess with it. In my older videos, I had to do that all the time because I used the Yeti Blue microphone and I didn't know how to use it. Because nobody, if you ever Google how to get rid of echo in audio, no one tells you to move it to your face. Like, I could be using my microphone like this and stuff, and I'd be like, how do I remove the microphone? And they're like, oh, well, you have to do like you have to use like some of these microphone filters and like all these other things, but no one tells you to move the microphone closer to your face. And that is one thing that building a YouTube channel a long time ago, I think I'm going to do a video on my 6th anniversary of this channel, which is coming up pretty soon. I'm going to make a video of like advice that I wish that people had told me or that I would learn before I started YouTube. And that's one of the bigger things. But so I'm glad that worked, because no one really mentioned it. You know, no one said like, oh my God, your audio is just terrible or something like that. Like, it's, you know, pretty much for the most part, people were like, you know, commenting on the actual subject matter itself. And, you know, so which means that the audio was good enough. It wasn't so terrible where somebody had to comment on it. And I'm pretty sure that anybody who's listening to the episode now is probably going to comment and be like, yeah, now that you mentioned it, it sounded really bad, you know? So, you know, I don't mind if people didn't think that the audio sounded weird, but like, it didn't sound enough where if I didn't tell you ever, you probably would have thought that I had a cold or something like that I sounded stuffed up, because like, that's what it kind of sounded like. So again, like, thanks Adobe for solving a problem that you actually like created, because like Adobe Audition, like, I paid a lot of money for this software, and it's like every so often it's just like, it just doesn't play nice. And I never did really figure out what happened to make it that audio. Like, I do not remember. Like, I don't know what setting or anything like that. I had to reset everything, and everything like worked again. 'Cause like I would do like a test, and now I'm so paranoid now that I do a microphone test before I start, and I listen to it right away before I even start recording now, just to make sure, you know, because I don't want that to ever happen again. But let me know if you thought that something didn't sound right. I'd be curious to hear what you had to say, or if you didn't notice it, like, let me know, because I'd be curious. No one said anything, so, you know, maybe you guys are just too nice to me to let me know that my audio sucks. Next topic, moving right along here, and that question is, would I ever sell my entire collection or a gigantic chunk of it? Now, again, I use RGT as an example here, but you know, some of the other people too are doing this as well. And what they're doing is they're selling a huge chunk of their collections. Like, they're looking at their collection and being like, you know, I could just get rid of this, or the or they're like, it just depends. Like, most people, like RGT, you know, he needs some money and stuff like that to pay for his medical bills, because, you know, he's in a spot and in a jam and stuff. And also, like, the way that he, you know, is approaching it too. He's talking to like actual game stores to sell in bulk. Like, he's doing the right thing to like just get it and just get it out of there. And I think like at the last time that he mentioned it, he was at like $30,000 or something like that. Like, and that was like below what price charting was even like suggesting. So I think like, you know, like, that raises a good question of like, would I ever sell? Like, what would it take for me to like get rid of my collection, or at least a huge chunk of it? And I have thought of this for a bit, because I have like considered getting rid of certain things. Like, I've always gotten to a point where I get frustrated with the clutter that is in my room. And that is something that, like, I'm going through right now. Like I'm like cleaning out my room, and I get overwhelmed because like when I film a video, like with the GameCube video, I took everything out of my room to get it all thing, and like it took me forever to get it like back to a spot, and I'm like, I can't deal with this stuff. Like I'm like, just take it and just get rid of it. And like every time my wife, she talks me out of it. And so, but like, what would it take for me to get rid of all my stuff? Because, if you ask me that question, like 3 or 4 years ago, I probably would have said the only reason why I would get rid of stuff would be to pay bills. Like if I lost my job, like knock on wood here, or if, something had happened where I needed money quick, that would be like the only reason that I would get rid of things. And now though, I have, I made a video about like selling certain games. And I think a lot of people, when you say that you're ready to like just sell, I think a lot of people get like really defensive of when you do decide to sell that, because it kind of like it forces you to reflect on like what would cause you to sell. And I have been just like reevaluating my collection goals. It's not necessarily that video games have gotten more expensive that I can't afford them anymore. Like I can afford it, but I think the prices that like the way that they're going, they really force you to think about what that means to add that to your collection. Like if you find a game for $3 or $4, or even 20 or 50, like 50 max or something like that. Like say you pay retail for it, it's not that big of a deal, because you're like, well, I can like, if I don't get around to it right now, like it's fine. I can buy it now because the price is going to be higher, going forward. That's usually like the mentality. Like if you ask a lot of like retro gamers that have started before that big price boom, that's what they would tell you. It's like, well, if I buy it now, like I can avoid it being like super high later and stuff. And most of the time, you're right. But now, like that the games are like so expensive, you're starting to actually like look at like, okay, will I actually play it? Like before you add it to the collection, like if you're buying a game that's like $100 to $150, then you really have to decide, why are you adding it to your collection? Are you adding it because you actually want this game, or are you adding it to your collection because everybody else has it? And that's a question that I've been like asking myself for a while now, because as time goes on, I'm finding myself playing pretty much the same like 20 to 30 games. Like there are certain games where I finally have enough time to like dedicate myself to, and I'm finding that the games aren't really that enjoyable to play, or I have no desire to play. Like my Switch collection, I have a lot of limited run game stuff that's sealed. It's worth a ton of money now, and I've just been selling it. Like my Celeste version of like the collector's edition that sold out like really quickly and stuff. I had enjoyed Celeste, and that collector's edition was like $200 and something, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to open it because I already have it. Like Celeste has been free on digital forever, so it's like I've already been playing it, and like Celeste for me isn't that enjoyable of a game where I want to have a collector's edition of. And that's really where I'm getting at, is I've started to like curate my collection. It's not that I'm like bored with video game collecting. I still love to collect video games, but I've now like forced myself to figure out what kind of games that I actually want to have in my collection to maximize the enjoyment out of it. You know, I don't really want to collect some random Atari games because I don't really have any nostalgic attachment to it. Like just before I started filming this podcast, you know, I was like working on my closet and I realized that I have duplicates of Atari games. Like if you've ever come across Atari games, like it's impossible to not have more than one, it's impossible to have just one copy of like Space Invaders, of Asteroids, or Combat, or any of these other games. Like you essentially, like, they just come to you. Like, you know, you run into people who are like, hey, I heard you like video games. I have a whole bunch of video games in my shoebox and stuff. And they give you a shoebox of Atari games. And it's like, boom, now you have 3 to 4 copies of Asteroids. And it's like, what am I going to do with all these games? So that's one thing that I was like starting to look through. I was like, okay, I'm going to get, because I have like 3 or 4 Atari 2600s. Like, what am I going to do with all those? I'm just going to pick one Atari 2600 and, you know, get rid of the rest. And so, you know, as I was like going through it, I was like, why do I need baseball? Like, am I ever going to play baseball? Am I ever going to play these like games that nobody's ever heard of? Like, am I going to play Pac-Man for the Atari 2600? Is that important to have? You know, the same thing with Mario Bros or anything else. Like, Atari, like, and it goes for every other, you know, system as well. It's not just like the old stuff that like I don't really have an attachment to, but it's like, you know, there are a certain number of games where I could sell off and then use that money to buy something that I actually want. And, you know, I don't know if it's like just like an older, you know, an old person, me, like starting to kick in because like I'm going to turn 40 in April, or if it's just me finally just like realizing that I don't need all of this stuff. You know, like it's the same thing with like these little mini consoles, and like I have 3 different Super Nintendos. I have 2 different regular Nintendos. I have, you know, 3 different PlayStation 2s. I have 2 like all this stuff. Like, do you like, I hope that you guys see what I'm getting at here is like, I want to consolidate. It's not that like I feel that I want to like get rid of everything, but you know, as time has gone on, you look at it and you look at the value and it's just sitting there, and like you could just like get rid of it and get something that you actually want. And you know, cause like, you know, in the early days of collecting, it was so easy to just accumulate. I've got games that, you know, that I bought for $10 a piece or something. Like I bought one time at a thrift store, like somebody had like essentially donated their entire PlayStation 1 collection. So I have Parasite Eve 1 and 2. I have Tactics Ogre. I have Final Fantasy 7. I have all of these like other like heavy, you know, games that are they're not cheap nowadays, and they weren't cheap when I found them too. Like same thing with Tactics Ogre. Like Tactics Ogre at the time was like $10 that I got at a thrift store, but at the time it was like $90. So, you know, like that was my motivation for even adding them to the collection. But now it's like, do I really want Tactics Ogre, or should I get rid of it and get something that, you know, maybe I'll, you know, buy Little Samson or not. But even then, like, too, it's like, do I want Little Samson, or do I want to get something that's like something that no one else has? You know, Like, it would be really cool to get one of those, like, Nintendo test stations or something like that. Or, I've been building up my Mac G4. I got a G4 Cube. It's beautiful. I got a 17-inch studio display. And the person that I bought it from, it's pretty much brand new. It came in the box. Like, what am I going to do with this box? Like, this box is gigantic. It takes up a ton of space. And I have no intention of, like, keeping the box. Like, I like, the box doesn't, like, it's back in the day where it's, like, very minimalist and everything. And it's like, my motivations for keeping the boxes are like the artwork and like what kind of emotional ties that it has to me. But let me know what you think, because that is one thing that I've been going back and forth to, because like in that video where I mentioned about selling the games, it's so difficult to sell stuff because people, they only want the high popular stuff. They don't want the random weird quirky stuff. Like I know that when I try to sell this Atari stuff with a whole crap ton of games, no one is going to touch it unless it's like $25. Like, it's not worth to sell. So I don't know. Like, I did get an invite to a video game convention and stuff that where a table is only like $40. So I might actually buy just a table and make a video out of it or something like that. But yeah, let me know if you guys ever had thought about, like, selling your entire collection or a huge chunk of it, or even if you've ever sold the collection, and like how you felt about it, because I've sold some stuff and it feels pretty liberating. All right, let's get into the final topic, and that is the PlayStation VR 2 first impressions. So I do plan on making a more extensive video in the future. I don't really plan on making a review of this because there's really not much to add to the conversation in that regard. So I do have a video planned addressing something that'll be hopefully a little bit more unique when it comes to the PlayStation 2 VR, PlayStation VR 2, and virtual reality in general. But I wanted to kind of give my first impressions so that they come out great. So I have been a fan with virtual reality for quite a bit. Long before virtual reality became like actually viable, but I've been lucky enough to play different videos or different systems and stuff. Like I got to get my hands on the Dev Kit 2 from Oculus, the Oculus Rift, the Vive, the PlayStation VR 1, and I also own a mixed reality set. It's called the Samsung Odyssey. It's a Windows mixed reality set. And so I've been a fan of virtual reality for a bit. So I got the PlayStation 5 when it was first released, and I knew, they had really mentioned too. They're like, hey, like, we're still on the VR bus and stuff, so we're going to come out with a second version of it. So I was like, okay, I'm not 100% sure if I want the PlayStation VR 2. We'll see what the headset looks like, because the first VR headset was, let's be honest, kind of really hodgepodge together. They used the PlayStation 4 camera from 2013. They used the Move controllers from the PlayStation 3, which were older than that. So it definitely, like, it's a miracle that they even got VR to work on the PlayStation 4. Just the way that it is, like the comfort and the actual like fidelity of it. Like, it definitely is it's an okay experience. It's not the best experience, but for what they were able to do, it was very impressive. So I was like, okay, let's see what the PlayStation VR 2 will look like. And as soon as I saw that they had eye tracking, that was like, okay, I will consider it. because they had mentioned it before even the price, and I think back in November is when they finally announced the price. And I'll talk about the price in a bit, but first impressions, I really like it. It is a very comfortable headset compared to my mixed reality headset, which was, a bit heavier. I think that's kind of like the thing about virtual reality right now. It's like, what can we do to make the headset more comfortable and not like, and also make sure that the fidelity and the refresh rate and everything like that is good. Because if you talk to any VR enthusiasts, like, those are the bigger things about virtual reality that used to be like a real sticking point, but now it's kind of like it's starting to become like a standardized process. So PlayStation 2, VR 2, it's great to play. It's easy to set up. It's very comfortable. It's got like a pass-through mode where you can set up your room scale, and you could see through the cameras that are on the headset to pick up your controllers and make sure that your controllers are right. Sometimes I'll need to put it on to hit the mute button on the remote control, but it's a very nice piece of kit. The controllers are really comfortable. Like they feel natural in your hand, and it's a headset that, like, if you wanted a premium, if you have a PlayStation 5 and you want a premium VR experience, then the PlayStation VR 2 is a really good buy. I know that, I've been playing Horizon Call of the Mountain. It's a lot of fun, but it's like mostly like a climbing simulator. Like, hindsight being 2020, I wish it was more of like shooting the bow, because the way that they were making it look like it, they were like, oh, you're going to shoot the bow a lot. And like, that's one of my favorite VR things to do, is like shoot bows and arrows and stuff. Like, that's the most fun to me. But it's a lot of climbing, and the control scheme was a little bit weird when it first came out. They were like, do you want to use gesture controls or do you want to use stick controls? And I was like, well, I don't know about the gesture controls, so I'm going to use the stick controls. And they're like, okay, cool, you can use the stick controls. And I was using the stick controls, and for the first time ever, I actually got like motion sick. And it's not necessarily that I was like going to hurl or anything like that. It was, I felt a little bit dizzy. And even after I took my, I took it out and like just sat in a chair. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever, like, it felt like if you've been on a boat all day and then you finally got onto solid land. I kind of was, waving in and out and everything. So I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to try the gesture controls. So I get the gesture controls, but the thing is that it doesn't give you a tutorial on how to use them. So I was like, how the heck do you use the controls? I'm like swinging my hands around. I was like, they don't work and stuff. And I finally had to like look it up, because it doesn't show you anywhere in the menus how to use these motion controls. And they're like, okay, you got to press the two buttons, and then you move your arms like you're going to run around. And that actually like solved a lot of the motion sickness of it. So, and it's actually like a little bit more intuitive than the stick controls, because stick controls is like a linear move, and you're not moving that slow. You're almost like on those moving sidewalks, like at the airport or something like that. If you stand on it and like you kind of move close, like that's what it feels like. But when you do the gesture controls, you can move as fast as you want, but the locomotion of your body doesn't make it look like you're moving too fast. So you're kind of like almost like you're running in place. And so like now the game is actually like, I'm like, okay, this is all right. I also got Synth Riders, which is like Beat Saber on steroids. This game, I need to actually like get used to it, because if you tried Beat Saber is like, you got these little lightsaber hands and stuff, and you cut through the bricks and everything. Well, Synth Riders is like your hands are these orbs, and you hit the beats of it, but like the beat per minute is like twice the beats per minute of like any type of Beat Saber song. So you're kind of just like, you're going and you're flicking your hands and everything like that, and you're doing all this other stuff. But that will get some used to. Okay. So I ran out of memory card space. I've been trying to shoot this particular section, and yeah, I've done it 3 times already. My battery died, and so I had to hook that up and all this other stuff. And now my memory card was full. I thought I took care of it, but anyway. So the price of the system, it's high. And I don't want to sound like a corporate shill or anything like that, because the price is a valid concern. Anytime that you see something that's expensive like this, and you think to yourself, hey, this is too expensive, I'm not going to buy it, that's good. Like, your consumer brain has finally kicked in and said, hey, this is a lot of money. Maybe you should think about whether or not you're going to get that much money in enjoyment in return on it and stuff. And like, that's kind of what I was getting at with, the collection and everything. It's so easy to add stuff to the collection that you don't actually need because it's so cheap. So now that, the PlayStation VR is a lot of money. The bundle that I got was $600. And then I got the controller charger thing, which is definitely recommended. I recommend it a lot. So that's an extra like $50, I think. So with tax, I'm in close to $700 for the VR set. So it's a lot of money. And the one thing that people have been kind of concerned about is like that Sony has made this too expensive that it's probably not going to catch on. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg scenario, right? Do games come out because of do people come to the platform to buy the games, or do the games need people to come to the platform, or like, do devs need the people to come to the platform in order to make games? And that's always been like kind of a weird thing for the past 10 to 15 years. Like that's always been kind of a weird thing of like, oh, if Sony doesn't sell enough units, they're just going to discontinue it, because that happened with the Vita, right? The Vita, if you go back and look at the Vita had 600 games in its library, like physical games. They had much more digitally. It sold 16 million units, and it's still like, Sony was like, it's not good enough. So like, that's a valid concern that people have about the PlayStation VR, because the PlayStation VR didn't necessarily sell a whole lot compared to the Vita. I think, that's an interesting question. I should have looked it up. PlayStation. So the PlayStation VR headset sold 5 million units in 4 years. It was released in 2016. And, it sold 5 million units in just 5 years. So if you compare that to the PlayStation Vita, it, it kind of, the brain like kind of goes, well, if the Vita couldn't make it and the PlayStation VR sold less than that, like, what does that mean for them? And I think, again, like, I'm trying not to sound like a corporate shill here, but I really do think that Sony kind of recognizes that that VR isn't an everybody thing, because even if you could afford virtual reality and stuff, like, you still have to have, like, there's certain accessibility to it that not everybody can enjoy it. So, some people, they get really motion sick. Like my wife, like can't enjoy VR at all. She like, no matter how clear and smooth it is, she gets really motion sick on it. It doesn't drive well with her. Like if you can't see without your glasses, like that was the main concern too. It's like you had to wait for a third party to make prescription glasses. So that way it wouldn't, the headset wouldn't scratch the lenses. Now that's like less of a concern, but still, like those are things that, VR has still yet to overcome. And I do think that like Sony understands that and now is pricing it accordingly in order for it to make it profitable. And I think that's really what people kind of miss when they talk sales numbers, because sales numbers, they mean a little bit, right? That's one part of the equation. Like if you lose, like you sell 16 million units, right? And you're selling it at, like, I think the PlayStation Vita was like $200 or something like that. So, when it first came out, so 216 million is like, that's a lot of money, right? However, if you're losing $100 on it, like every unit, like if you're losing $100 on every unit sold, you're losing more money than you're actually bringing in. So you're selling at like a severe loss. And the issue kind of is that that's not sustainable. So, like I think Sony had like gotten to an approach where Sony was like, okay, if we sell the Vita at a loss or something, like we'll make it up into software sales. And like that's always been the case with like the PlayStation originally, right? So like the PlayStation, the first PlayStation and the PlayStation 2, they were sold at a loss and they kind of made it up with software. Like more and more people would buy more software and stuff, and that would kind of like subsidize the cost of the system. And they tried to be like, okay, we're going to come up with the PlayStation 3, and the PlayStation 3 was like stupid expensive when it first came out. And I still think that they sold it at a loss, but not as much. But no one bought it because it was so expensive. And so they had to like readdress it and realign. And I don't think that anybody was like really expecting the Nintendo Wii to like sell as much as it was. So it was kind of still of a race to the bottom. And so, PlayStation did it again with the PlayStation 4, and they're like, okay, we're gonna sell it at a loss to like really stick it to Xbox. And now with the PlayStation 5, I really do think that they're gonna try it again to make it a system that you're paying for the features. You're not really getting a subsidized system. And I think people don't quite understand that they're going to do it with the PlayStation VR. And when you look at the PlayStation VR and all the tech that goes into it, $550 for just the headset is accurate. Like it's not overpriced and it's not underpriced. It's like right where it needs to be. So, I'm going to wrap this up because like all of my stuff is like just not playing nice and everything. But what I'm saying is that Sony specifically has, like, if you look at any other Sony product outside of the PlayStation brand, they're always trying to be at the upper level of the price point. They're not necessarily the cheapest. They're not the most expensive, but like they're in like this weird like gap where it's like, it's just above mid-range. Like look at their TVs, look at their cameras, like they're selling, like look at their phones, look at their cameras. Like I have Sony camera equipment and everything. It's pricey, but you get what you pay for. And the same thing with their TVs, like the Sony Trinitrons and everything at the time. Like those were expensive TVs for the time, but they were a higher level of it and stuff. And I really do think that that's what they're trying to do with the PlayStation VR 2. So, let me know what you guys think of it, because again, it's okay to think that the PlayStation VR 2 is too expensive. You don't have to buy it in order for it to be successful. And I really do think that Sony is banking on the people who actually do have the money to buy it will also buy the software that goes along with it. And in turn, what they're doing is that they're helping standardizing VR in general, so that way more games can come out for all of VR, and then lift VR as a platform, rather than hoping, is it going to come out for the Quest, is it going to come out for the Vive, or is it going to come out for PlayStation? You had 3 different platforms, and now you have pretty much just one unified VR standard, and then you can kind of decide which market that you want to go into, and that makes VR in general better. So I hope that makes sense. But I'm going to cut it off there. I've talked on long enough. If you guys want me to talk about the VR a little bit more in general, like, I'm going to make a full video on it, and I'm going to focus more on like what I was just talking about there. But let me know what you think about the comments and everything, and comment below, like the video. I really do appreciate that everybody's watching here. Like, we're getting 150 to 200 views per episode. Like, that's pretty good. Like, I'm really excited about that. So again, thanks so much for watching. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at snicktendo. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next episode.